So chapter 16, lots of dumb. Lots of dumb in it. So it starts. Apparently, Boba and Jango walking around Kamino. They go and find the Delta 7, which is Obi-Wan's starfighter thing, right? And Boba's looking at it and all that, taking that in. It's just really excited, which, makes sense for a kid. But so much of the description for it is like, whoever came up with this is an idiot. I'm going to try to flip to the page. I don't really need to, but it's still, if I can just read off, maybe that'll help impress just how really asinine it is. Yeah, this is a Delta 7. These were new ships. So new that they hadn't yet been fitted with hyperdrive engines. What? Who's designing ships for that will be getting hyperdrive engines, but already selling them before they can? Like, that's real new, right? Like, there shouldn't be many of these on the market yet. I mean, what? It's really dumb. It seems this is only for the purpose of making Jango consider, are their parent ships up there about to, rain fire down on me, kind of thing. But it's like, what? I'm just trying to think what would be comparable, but we don't have, I can't think of many things that have multiple engines in them. Because, I mean, it's not like it would be, well, no, could that work? I guess in a way that could work. Like if you had a hybrid, one of the more traditional hybrids. Well, no, it actually would have to be a plug-in hybrid. And all you had was the electric motor in there, which would be small and not very powerful. Not really meant to get you up to highway speeds. And batteries that aren't very large either, so it wouldn't last very long. Yeah, you can sell that, and we'll put in the gasoline engine later that, allows you to have range and speed and power. At higher speeds, at least. Electric motors are good for low-end torque, so lots of power at low speed. Gasoline engines tend to be better for high-end torque, but anyway. It's like, you wouldn't sell that car! It's incomplete! What is this? This is nonsense! It continues though, and what of the droid? Can you identify the unit? Boba looked at it. It's an R4P, he said. And is that a common droid for this type of starfighter? No, I thought this was new. How is it both new enough that it's missing a major component, but also old enough for it to be, is it common to find this specific thing on there that not only do I know, but I've taught this to you, Boba. I've somehow decided that this needs to be part of my homeschooling of you. And is that a common type of droid for this? No. Delta 7 pilot would usually use an R3D. Why? Why would you know any of this? It's better at keeping the guns targeted, and the fighter is so maneuverable that handling the laser cannons is tricky. I read that some pilots wind up shooting their own nose cones off in this fighter. I literally put in my notes, this is insultingly stupid, because it is. This is insulting the intelligence of a reader and knowledge of a reader. I don't know a hell of a lot about military history, but I know this is... No, this would never exist, okay? Let me help put this in context. And I didn't check on the numbers. I just remembered this. To be fair, though, it is also kind of mentioned, like in the prologue of my first book, which I don't recommend, so I'm not going to name it. In less than a century, I think it was 70 years as I recall, we went from Kitty Hawk to the moon. 70 years. Much sooner than that. Kitty Hawk to World War I, where we had planes in the air with guns on them. And you know what they did? They actually tried various things to prevent somebody from shooting their own propeller. One thing that they tried and turned out to be a very bad idea was armoring, putting armor on the propellers. Yes, the propellers then survived. The problem is that the armor caused the bullets to bounce off and so would destroy the rest of the airplane and potentially kill the pilot. That's a bad idea. So then they realized, well, if we just have a gearing system that connects the gun to a safety in the gun, essentially, to the engine, that would work. Because the engine, when it's in certain positions, the propeller is up. So every time that the propeller is up, it basically would hit a rod that would then engage a stop on the gun. So it couldn't fire. It would not be possible for it to fire when the propeller is in a position that it could be hit. Okay? It is 2025. That technology would be 100 years old. Actually older, I believe. This is frickin' spaceships. But they can't figure this shit out. This is what I mean by insultingly stupid. This is nonsense. This is utter nonsense. Alright, this isn't we'll see, Boba and Jango, they know this. No. Because you need this to be plausible. You need it to be reasonable. That this is completely unreasonable. It's pissing me off. I mean, at least one thing that it does acknowledge with this is that technically the blasters can be moved. But again, it's why would you ever allow the blasters to move in a direction that could strike the craft? I mean, it's like the placement of the gun and the placement of the craft cannot change. Right? I mean, it's not like you have propellers on this thing that are moving. No, they're fixed. And it's also, I'm not as certain on this, but it does seem pretty damn obvious that if you can figure out that complex system of connecting the engine to the gun to prevent you hitting the propeller, that then, like Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, when Dr. Jones Sr. sweeps the machine gun around and actually shoots their tail, you'd think that they would also have a similar mechanism there that engages a safety the moment it is aimed in a position that could strike the tail. In theory, you would also want that so you're not hitting the wing or the pilot. The pilot would make more sense. That just in general, you wouldn't want to do that. Because also, if you're aiming that in that direction forward, the pilot has a gun as well. So you'd think that would cover it anyhow. But it's like, the tail, you think you could do that. I can understand the wing, it would be hard to do because of how that's, specific horizontal line that's upwards. The tail's basically here, and you just have a triangle kind of in this spot. Don't let it fire, and at a certain height it stops. I'm not sure about the wing necessarily, but still incredibly reasonable. And in the movie, they just did that as a joke. That he shot off their own tail. That was just a joke. But that no such plane ever existed. I'll say no such plane ever existed. That might be not completely true, but it's also that's early World War II, so even better technology, more time would have been put into it. It is reasonable that that wouldn't be a thing. But here, no, it's completely possible. Okay. And again, it's so new a fighter, but I read that some pilots, apparently it's not that new. It is not that new. Do I have the tracking turned on? Yes, I do. Let's turn that off. I really should I'm pretty sure I can go in and just turn off the hand signal for turning that on. There was a button, a touch sensitive spot that I can hit to turn it on and off. All right. Okay, that one's going to set me off on a rant as well. So I'll skip that for the moment. I will put a marker on it, though, so I don't forget. So when Obi-Wan is being shown the clones, by the way, all of this chapter is at Kamino. When he's being shown, it is mentioned to him that they actually would have preferred to use a Jedi source for the genetic material, so clones of Jedi. But Master Sifo Dyce, or however you pronounce his name, Sifo, but I think I'll just keep it to that. He rejected that idea and said, no, use Jango Fett. And they do say he selected Jango, which is a bit of an issue for later on. But I want to continue with this. Obi-Wan then does comment that, well, a mental comment, that the idea of clones strong in the Force is unsettling to him, is scary to him. Which does indicate then that, at least to his knowledge, hang on, I just want to see if it should be near here anyway, that they would be sensitive, that they would also be strong in the Force, that you can clone the Force. Yes, an army of clones strong in the Force. And it's just one of those things, it's like, I don't like that. I mean, I don't like the idea of midichlorians in general. I mean, it's like, using the Force, the ability to use Force should have been left a mystery. Nothing wrong with that. And so then also the idea that children of Force users don't necessarily have the ability to use the Force. Like, it's not just inherited. And at the same time, that just because your parents can't use it doesn't mean that you won't be able to, that you could still have it. So it's... I don't know, I'm just... So the idea that that a clone could then have the use of the Force is odd to me. It's like, I feel like we shouldn't be, in the fundamental lore, in the foundational lore, be allowing that. But okay, fine. It can be passed on. It is somehow genetic. Although, actually, that does remind me, one thing that occurred to me, is that if the midichlorians are described as they are, act as they are described in The Phantom Menace, with them being microorganisms that are symbiotic with the person, with the being, technically that means it would actually follow a matrilineal line, not patrilineal. Because then that would make it seem like the midichlorians are most akin to the mitochondria, which I think George did take inspiration from that term. And the mitochondria are actually passed down through the mother only. So my mitochondria come from my mom. My dad has no contribution there because it's part of how... Actually, I even saw something not long ago talking about it. Because the egg is a complete cell, essentially, it has the mitochondria in there. And so those mitochondria, during the cell division, will divide themselves. And so their DNA is replicated there. Whereas the sperm doesn't. It would lack the mitochondria there. So that it has nothing to pass on. In that vein. Just one thing that had occurred to me, and it's like, that is kind of interesting, again, for the idea of it being genetic, because that would mean then that it is like that, and would it necessarily... Yeah, I guess it would also depend on how they're doing the cloning. But what would it mean as far as somebody else trying to collect DNA and do this? In fact, oh, geez, that's true. In theory, that means you could... If they are akin to mitochondria, you could potentially then, with science fiction technology, remove, and this actually can be done, as I recall, remove the genetic material out of an egg, put in whatever genetic material you want. So you could then make... You wouldn't need to clone a Jedi. You could just take the egg from a Jedi mistress, and be able to use that to make any new genetic information you want to put in there, not just a clone, but anyone. Well, like a clone of anyone, but make them into a Jedi, because if it is like mitochondria and would follow that line, wow, that actually is a very interesting thing about it. It would also mean potentially that through a cloning facility, you might be able to, if you can remove that genetic information, you might be able to remove the mitochondria, which would also remove the midichlorians then, and make somebody not a Jedi. This is the kind of stuff that I know is technical, but it actually is legitimately what I enjoy thinking about for stuff like this, Star Trek, my own writings as well. Because it is okay, well, what are the implications of this? How could this be used? Because it then does beg the question, why wouldn't somebody try to get a blood sample from, well, some sort of genetic sample from any Jedi, and do this. Or, instead of it being a clone of Jedi, so they might be recognized, like, if there's another Yoda walking around, you might have a problem, because somebody might recognize me, like, hey, wait, you're not Yoda. But if you could make any being into a Jedi, yes, you would need to grow them up, to develop them like any clone does, have them grow up. It still is. You could do that. That there are so many implications from that. It also makes the sequel trilogy, which is not worth anyone's time, in my opinion, weird, because Snoke was supposed to be attempts at cloning, but it's like, well, why were they incompetent clones? None of it really makes much sense. The midichlorian stuff shouldn't have been touched on it. Yeah. But anyhow, what was the next standpoint? I mean, it really is just the whole, as far as everyone knows, the Force can be, would carry through a clone. Anyhow. Oh, yeah. Then there was one thing. I actually do want to find it. Okay. Once again, as Shudder coursed down Obi-Wan Kenobi's spine, this is after him seeing the full, army in, the armor even down there and seeing all that on parade. For the first time, he appreciated Senator Amidala's crusade to stop the creation of an army of the Republic and the inevitable consequence, war. This is again dumb, and he is now stupid, just as she is stupid. The existence of an army doesn't lead to war. I mean, if anything, well, yeah. The existence of an army only leads to war in that when somebody tries to conquer you, now there is a war to be fought, as opposed to them just conquering you. But even then, we do know, because it's kind of going on at the moment, it has been for a while, that even when a nation doesn't necessarily have that strong a military, the citizens become the army. So, you still end up with a war. This is utter nonsense, and it is indicative of somebody not thinking through anything. It's like, armies fight wars, therefore if there's no army, there's no armies, there's no war. It's like, that's not how that works. Armies don't... maybe that is a good way to put it. You don't, take a genetic sample and be like, oh, look at that, it says that you're going to be in the army. That's not how that works. It is a choice that people make. Sometimes it is a choice made for them, in the case of drafts and conscription, where it's like, armies are formed out of a population. It's basically a subsample, a sample of a population, right? So an army can always just be created. It can also always be disbanded. That has nothing to do with the existence or the occurrence of war. It's just, well, whether or not the army is formed at the time and it's not, yes. But I mean, it's like, war can happen regardless of the existence of an army. This is just stupid. And you know what? Okay, and that actually works fine, because the rest of the notes are a different thing. The note that I skipped. I didn't mention this in the previous chapter, or two previous chapters. Whenever it was that Obi-Wan was first arriving on Kamino, he actually flew around. He made a circuit of the city, Tipaco, something like that. Made a circuit because it was actually very beautiful. And it even described, it reminded him of the aesthetics of the Jedi Temple, also the Senate. But I want to focus on the Jedi Temple, which was very, very clearly described as it is meant to be aesthetically beautiful. That I even made a point when they were in the Jedi Temple, I think, that they have artwork there, and some do believe that that is immensely important to learning the Force, is having this appreciation for art. Okay? So, the appearance of the city it reminds him of the Jedi Temple. What does he find inside, though? A bunch of people who, from a very young age, are being are growing up, being educated, and are being controlled, being given a singular culture that involves discipline, but is to become warriors. In other words, I'm reading this, I'm recognizing, hey, Obi-Wan, will you recognize, please notice, holy crap, this is just like the Jedi. The difference is the Jedi aren't clones. But the idea of taking children in, forcing them into a specific way of life, a very specific way of life that is developed over centuries. Our methods have been perfected over many centuries. The Camino tell him. This is straight up a mirroring of the Jedi. but it's without the Force, and they are clones. But it still is. I'm seeing this. It's like this is actually like the Jedi just taken one step further. And he is being repulsed by this. He finds this disgusting and disturbing. Because, I mean, to be fair, these are beings that have been created for the singular purpose of warfare. They exist to kill and to be killed so that other people don't have to. And it's the Camino actually, I think, twice make the point that they have an advantage over droids, and that while they are highly disciplined and will do whatever you tell them, just like a droid, they have creative thought. So that makes them more versatile. But it still is, dude, you're in a version, a like twisted variant, but very, very recognizable. There we go. Version of the Jedi Temple. That's exactly what this is. And I do wonder, because I know it's just, I got that whole thing that I might be reading. I might be reading into some, but I do think this is not that far out. I do think that theory that I've been talking about, that the Jedi are not really the good guys, not by just, hey, you're a Jedi, that means you're a good guy, that should be rejected. And that when things like the whole child soldiers, that looking at this, it's like, I do think that this is here to be like, yes, we're reflecting that. And it isn't that far away. And in some ways, this may sound weird. In a way, it might be a little bit better. Because, well, actually in two ways. One is the whole, they literally exist to be warriors. That is the only reason they exist. So there is a certain aspect of, because it is like satisfying their nature, their purpose in existence, to be a warrior, that's better than, why'd you have a kid that ended up being a Jedi? Well, I had a kid because I love my wife. And it's like, well, now that kid's been taken away from me. It's like, shit. That's not what was intended for that kid's life. Not as far as the parents are concerned, but there's something else that I remembered and then it slipped from my mind. I do want to talk about that, but that's... Oh, yeah, and just finishing off the point I was trying to make was that the younglings that were training with Yoda were described as being 4 or 5 years old. And so they... Oh, yeah, that's right. He actually... Obi-Wan does make a comment about how half of their time as children has been taken from them. Okay, they were living beings that they were talking about, living, breathing, and thinking to create clones for a singular purpose under such control. Even stealing half their childhood for efficiency assaulted his sense of right and wrong. And the fact that a Jedi Master had begun all this was almost too much to digest. But still, even stealing half their childhood for efficiency. Dude, the Jedi steal all your childhood. Okay, I'm like, this is half, and he's only saying that because it's like, they go, in 10 years, they grow up to be essentially 20 years old. So they grow up faster. That's all he's referring to. It's like, well, you lost half the time. It's like, dude, the Jedi are just as bad here. In some ways worse, because as I said, they're stealing the kids. At least these units, final products, I get how that is dehumanizing, but they are to create clones for such a singular purpose. It's like, yes, that is their purpose. Don't get me wrong, I hate this idea too. All right, it is horrible. It's like on the level of oh crap, what's the episode of Star Trek where two planets are at war, but they're actually not. It's just they run simulations, and it's like, oh well, according to this simulation, 1 million people would have died if that actually happened. So we'll just execute. We'll just kill 1 million people, and you have to report to the chambers to be killed. It's like that. It's kind of like that. It is also so screwed up. But there is still that whole, where coming back, it is so screwed up because of the whole, these is a clear devaluing of life, and potentially it risks devaluing it even further. because the people, I mean, who needs to care about a clone? They're nobody you know. You have no connection to them, and they exist for only that purpose. You don't need to care if you kill them, or if they get killed. They are ready to be sacrificed. That is high level screwed up, and I would like to say worse, but I caught myself on that. So it's just like in that Star Trek episode where they clearly do not have the value for the life of their own citizens to protect them, to keep them from dying. To say, no, we must protect their lives. Which I do, to me, the way that episode ends is that basically because the computers are destroyed, so which would end the treaty, so now they have to go back to fighting a war. But it's like, well, no, neither side actually wants to fight it. It's like, after the episode ends, they're going to realize, yeah, we actually just grew comfortable with having no value to the life around us. We don't want this war, so yes, let's actually end it. Like, we want the war to be ended, we just lost the sense of stakes here because we stopped caring about the people being killed here. Well, and that war in Star Trek was like hundreds of years old. One thing that, not that I'm a military historian, but one thing that I have kind of come to the conclusion of, I don't think I had the grammar right there, but in any case, the way a war really ends is when you break the citizens, the civilians' morale for it, will to fight it. Because, as I said before, an army is built out of the population. It's a sample of the population. So as long as the population is willing to fight the war, you will continue to have an army. As long as the civilian population is willing to provide for the war, growing the food for it, building the weapons for it. As long as you have that desire, that capability, that will for it, it will continue. The clone army disconnects that. That is incredibly dangerous. And it is horrible. It is absolutely horrible. But again, it still is the whole, Jedi, I kind of like this too, dude. Okay. And unfortunately, no, he doesn't notice the similarity. Maybe he will later, but yeah. Okay, so, some confusing stuff. So, Kamino had said there was Master Sifo who ordered the clones, which Obi-Wan seems to just accept that is the case, even though he has no reason to trust that that is true. When he meets Jango says that, no, he was hired by somebody named Tyrannus, which I think is supposed to be, like, Count Dooku, his Sith name is Darth Tyrannus, which, again, that doesn't make sense. How he was described earlier, he should have fully rejected Palpatine. Like, full-on turned around, walked away, or been like, oh, you're the Sith you're a Sith Master? Lightsaber out, let's try to kill you now. I mean, it's like... Or he was lying in the Jedi Temple a lot, but yeah. I am looking forward to when we meet and getting to know Count Dooku as the story continues, because it is possible they just did his character dirty. They set him up in a way that he could be a third party in this, but nah. So anyway, Jango says Tyrannus. This is a plot hole to a degree. Because, like, okay, who is Tyrannus now? Because the Kamino said Sifo named Jango as the source. So how does Tyrannus fit into this? How could Sifo have said, yes, I want Jango, but have no connection to him then? It makes no sense. It may get explained. We'll see. But for right now, it makes no sense. Yes, it does imply that this is a larger conspiracy than we know, which is fine. But we need it to be explained. And that is something I'm not necessarily trusting, because I know in other Star Wars novelizations, they also had things where it's like they're setting up a conspiracy and then it never gets explained. And I know that I'm guilty of that as well, sort of. But I always had the defense of, when that happens, it's the person who the story is following doesn't know it. That's never part of their perspective. Here, we do move perspective around. We do at times have third person unlimited, where it's now just whatever the narrator is giving us. But it is also part of what's going on here is trying to figure out what's going on. So we should have this answered, because it is like, what the hell's going on here? You're just giving us this information, but it's always like half the information. Nothing seems to connect together. So I really, really want them to explain, because otherwise my opinion of the book will go down. It legitimately will, because it's you're setting things up without any, you're half setting things up and then never explaining them, never having a payoff. And it annoys me. I hate that. And let me be clear, for the, like in my books, I'm just trying to think of what a good example of that would be. Because yeah. I think I'll just pause the recording as I think on it. Okay, I remembered one. Only took me about a minute. It would either be late 40s, early 50s. It's to me, how I separate up the chapter. In the Show Many Gifts, basically every 10 chapters is like a part to it. That's just accidentally how it worked out. After the 40s, which you'll recognize what the end of that is, so start of the 50s, there is a reference to an earthquake in Cleveland, which, by the way, yes, we actually do get earthquakes here. They're very low power, typically, and I can never quite remember some of the names to it, but it's basically, when we get them, they're the kinds that, yes, they're low, but they are felt for a very, very large radius, as opposed to somewhere like in California, where they can be very high intensity, but they tend not to be felt as far away. So it is just mentioned there that, yeah, that's what's going on here, that's what it was. No, that's actually not what happened there. But it is no one witnessing that would be aware of this. It was actually, I'll just say, Sam, this is technically a spoiler, Sam creating acid and them initially fighting, but they did so underground, that they were hiding there, which it's already set up that Sam does, will hide underground for some stuff. And also how that was constructed is another thing, where Constance never has this perspective to know how that actually, the cave was created, because part of it was natural, part of it was Sam made it. But it's never important what the earthquake was. It's just, it happened. It's a little bit of a tidbit that's like, I know what it means, now you know what it means. When I do the assigned reading, I will talk about it then as well. But similar, well, not necessarily, with the cave. Part of that is, it's natural. Part of it is, it was always there. Part of it is also, Sam made it. That's borderline irrelevant to the story, though. It's very small. It's, as I said, it's borderline irrelevant to the story. Who ordered the clone army is not irrelevant to 2 of the 3 books here. 2 of the 3 stories here. You kind of can't just be like, well, the characters we follow never know. It's like, that's not how it works. We need to know. It's important. We do finally get confirmation, though, about one thing. Well, not exact confirmation, but Django does think about how the Trade Federation hired him to kill Padme. So they are the ones who put the hit out on her. Now, this opens up some issues as well. Because do they then know about the clone army? Like, do they know he's on Kamino? Is that how they contact him? Or does he leave and, check a dead drop somewhere? And so no one actually knows that he's at Kamino, including those trying to hire him. But it is just so weird, because also, the whole thing about, no, Tyrannus hired me for the clone army, because he's answering Obi-Wan, so he wouldn't be referring to, oh yeah, the Trade Federation hired me to kill somebody. There's no way he's answering. There's no way he's giving that answer. So if it is then that Count Dooku is Tyrannus, and Dooku hired him to make the clone army, then he's aware of that. Then he would be aware of the army, but he never does anything to gain control of the army himself. Because it would make sense then, with this, that he would go and claim them, saying that, yes, I'm a representative of the Republic. Give them to me. And now he has an army that cannot go to the Republic. He also has, with the Separatists, because the Trade Federation joined, that army as well. I got the only army in town. Go ahead. Vote to form your own army. By the time you do it, I've already conquered you. It all needs to be answered. This is not, you cannot just be like, well, this character never knows it. Who we're following never knows. That's not good enough. Because there are too many things where it's like, you have to actually explain this. These are major points. You have to actually explain it. Hopefully it will, but... These were new ships, so new that they hadn't yet been fitted with hyperdrive engines. If we can have something that stupid and laser cannons that can shoot your own ship, I do not have much confidence that we will get these very important questions answered. At least not in this. One thing, give it a little bit more time. One thing that's occurred to me about the whole, because I mentioned with the Phantom Menace, the whole thing about you need to be a Force user to wield a lightsaber for the precognitive ability, so you don't cut yourself. That they're that dangerous. One thing that I remembered, I still have no idea where I learned that. It's possible though. I actually read it from a newspaper. You need to understand that when the prequel trilogy was coming out, that was such big news. It actually ran in the newspaper. And I remember one thing, a feature just talking about pod racing. This may have been before the movie came out. I don't quite remember. But I do remember another, and my brother might actually still have this, like cut it out and kept it. An entire, like half page talking about Mace Windu's lightsaber. Because while all the other lightsabers use crystals, the kyber crystals, his is it's electromagnetic. It's something. It's using an electrical system to replace the crystal. That's part of the reason why it's a different color. And it's like I'm just half a page in a newspaper for that. That's how much excitement there was. Also, how much marketing there was. That's how big a deal it was. It's possible that I did read that and it is canon for the prequel trilogies, but I didn't read it in the novel. It's possible I read it in something like that, as opposed to just being made up head canon or seeing it somewhere else that may have been outside of the movie level canon. So, but anyway, I'm just saying that because hopefully we don't have some of the answers to these questions are going to come would be found in those newspaper clippings and such, because that's bad. That's really bad. That's as bad as, and this is part of the reason why I think the sequel trilogy is bad, especially Rise of Skywalker, is the whole thing about Palpatine returning, which is never really well explained. Where did that actually happen? In Fortnite. That's where they had it happen, in Fortnite. It's not even in the movie. You had to know about this event in a video game, and either take part in it yourself or watch somebody streaming it to know this. Otherwise, you get the crawl that's just, what was it, Palpatine lives and somehow he's returned. It's like, I thought it was a sequel trilogy that did stuff like that. Maybe it was earlier. We'll find out as I continue reading, because who knows? It might be that, nope, everything gets answered in the coming chapters. Maybe, hopefully. See you next time.